Suddenly, Yemen's no longer a proxy war in a remote location. Coalition launching airstrikes and shelling to stop Iran-allied Houthi militiamen from taking over the entire country. The Houthis already control the capital and look set to take over the port city of Aden, gateway to the Red Sea and to Europe. Little surprise, then, to see Egypt getting involved. There's also Jordan, the other Gulf states, Sudan, Pakistan. This Sunni coalition backed with logistics and intelligence by the United States. The confusing bit comes now. The U.S., which is also now backing up Iranian-backed Shiite forces with airstrikes against ISIS in Saddam Hussein's Iraqi hometown of Tikrit. Shiite militias this Thursday announcing they're pulling back. Is it to do with what's going on in Yemen? Will events in Yemen undermine a historic nuclear deal with Iran that could be just days away from a breakthrough? Are we witnessing the start of an all-out Sunnis versus Shias confrontation throughout the region? A confrontation that, after all, isn't just what the jihadists wanted. Today in the France 24 debate, Yemen, the escalation. With us from Dubai, Riyad Kawaji, founder of the Institute for Near East and Gulf Military Analysis. Thank you for being with us here in the France 24 debate. It's a pleasure to welcome back from Lund, Sweden, Ruzbeh Parsi, senior lecturer at Lund University. We're also joined from Tel Aviv by Yemen watcher Miriam Goldman of risk consultants Max Security Solutions. Welcome to the show. And welcome back to Egyptian analyst Mohamed Elalfy. Also joining us on the telephone from the Yemen port city of Aden. We'll hear from her in a moment. Summer Nasser, contributor to the France 24 Observers, our citizen journalists website. The France 24 debate, where you can join the conversation on Facebook and Twitter, our hashtag F24debate. 24 hours ago, the fall of Aden seemed imminent. The president's entourage denying reports he'd fled the country by boat. Abdurabu Mansour Hadi has since shown up in Riyadh, but he says it's all on the up and up as he heads to an Arab League summit. His supporters retaking the airport in Aden, and in places like Taiz, they're cheering the Saudi-led airstrikes. Other Yemenis, though, are protesting, like in the capital, Sana'a. Under the control of those Houthi militias, Sana'a, the target of strikes this morning. It's all happening in the region's poorest state, yet one which had held out hope of political compromise after calls for reform that started with the Arab Spring in 2011. Today in the France 24 debate, we're looking at it all, and we can begin by showing you this report by Solange Mougin.
Last summer, everything seemed relatively calm in Yemen, a change from 3 years earlier when Arab Spring protests rocked the country, an uprising that led then President Ali Abdullah Saleh to step down after 33 years in power. Abdurabu Mansour Hadi took his place, but Yemen's new leader didn't manage to unify the country, an ideal opportunity for Yemen's Houthis to wrest control. The Shiite group from the north took advantage of a wave of protests against high gas prices. In July, they marched alongside protesters. Then in September, they managed to gain control of the capital, Sana'a.
We can question the speed, the sudden way they took control of Sana'a, which wasn't their hub, and the advance towards the south. What is likely is that they are benefiting from an alliance of convenience with the former entourage of President Ali Abdullah Saleh.
In January, the Houthi militia seized control of government buildings. President Hadi was put under house arrest. But in February, he managed to flee and tried to rule from the south. Yet the Houthis continue to close in, and the president's exact whereabouts are unknown. While the international community still considers him president, Yemen is currently ruled by militia, namely but not only by the Houthis. For the past few years, a branch of al-Qaeda has set up shop in Yemen. A Sunni group, they're sworn enemies of the Shiite Houthis, making the battle between the Houthis and al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula a sectarian conflict that could become a proxy war.
It's a very new thing, the religious element, and we can deduce that it isn't free from external interference from both Sunni Saudi Arabia and Shiite Iran, as well as the regional situation, which has increasingly become a conflict between Sunnis and Shiites.
And then there's the Islamic State group. A local militia has pledged allegiance to them, claiming responsibility for killing 142 people in an attack in Sana'a. One more actor in an already impoverished country that's increasingly slipping into chaos.
We're getting a statement now out of Riyadh. Saudi Arabia says it has no immediate plans to launch a ground offensive, but its forces are ready if necessary. Riyadh Kawaji, our correspondent, reporting troop buildups on both sides of the border between Saudi Arabia and Yemen. Where is it all going?
Well, eventually, we're going to see a gradual escalation of this military operation. Right now, we had the traditional opening of a military campaign where the alliance led by the Saudis have gone in to neutralize all air defenses, destroy command and control centers, also knock out communication posts. This way, they will establish air superiority, air dominance, and then they will move gradually on clamping a naval blockade to prevent the flow of any supplies to the Houthis. And they will continue with airstrikes for the next few days in the hope that this will persuade the Houthis to go back on their hardline stand and show willingness to compromise and accept a peace plan. Otherwise, this will ultimately escalate into a land offensive.
And do you share that hope?
The hope of a peaceful settlement, yes. I don't share the hope of, seeing a war. However, from what I heard today of statements from the Houthis, they seem still on their old hardline stand, and therefore I'm unfortunately a bit pessimistic that we will be avoiding a ground offensive in the next week or two.
Yeah, the head of the rebels telling his supporters to, quote, fight against the intervention of Riyadh. Miriam Goldman, has it spun out of control, or can they go back to the bargaining table?
I think it really depends on the results of this intervention. I think we really have to look at what the goals are of each of these. So, for example, let's look at this initial intervention. We're talking about limited airstrikes. What are the goals here? To pressure the Houthis to go back to talks, to limit their capabilities, to stop their movement south. If this doesn't work, as Riyadh said, then we're talking about a potential ground incursion. And I think then the goals might actually change. So we're talking about moving from pressuring them to return to talks to possibly a goal of actually defeating the Houthis entirely, so that when they do go to talks that eventually may commence, they'll go from a much weakened position, and they will be unable to get what they want to, they'll be unable to get anything, essentially, or they'll be unable to pressure the other parties in negotiations, which is exactly what we've seen in the other two sets of negotiations. I'm talking about the ones in January and the ones in September.
And so Miriam Goldman, on that point, the Saudis and their allies, they say now that there's going to be a unified Arab League force. Do you see ground forces realistically being able to defeat the Houthis on Yemeni soil?
It depends on the extent and the size of the operation. I think that they do not want to do this, but I think if they see an extended long-term airstrike campaign, something to the extent that we're seeing in Iraq and Syria, which will be ineffective and move public opinion more against it than it already has, I think then they may be move toward the position of we don't want something like this. We actually want to defeat them. We're not going to take the U.S. approach of airstrikes only.
All right. The United States, which, by the way, says it could provide radar and could also provide supply support for the operation. The White House saying it's concerned about, quote, Iranian activities in Yemen.
Is a path here that can be pursued to try to resolve the differences among the parties. However, that path cannot be pursued as long as you have the Houthis working with former President Saleh to foment a lot of instability in the country.
Ruzbeh Parsi, you surprised Washington endorsing this statement, this intervention by this Saudi-led coalition?
Not necessarily. I mean, we have to remember that the United States have invested a bit in trying to re-establish some kind of stability in Yemen. And in this attempt, the new president is crucial. So anyone who tries to depose him will obviously then basically undermine the whole American effort.
It was said because the Saudis announced the offensive through their U.S. ambassador. The announcement came on U.S. soil. Some wondering aloud, did the Saudis press Washington's hand?
Well, I mean, we can speculate to what extent the Americans were happy with this particular way of going about it. But undoubtedly, the Americans were somewhere informed and participated in the sense that you cannot operate this amount of military hardware, especially air forces, without the United States being aware of it.
And where is it all going?
Well, again, as the previous speaker said, here there is a definite risk of mission creep. I mean, there's a difference between trying to beat someone back or trying to get them to come to the negotiation table by using air force. It's a totally different thing bringing in your own soldiers and the messiness of a ground assault, where obviously you will then feel that we might as well try and just take them out rather than just bring them back to the negotiation table. We also have to remember that the Houthis themselves will also react. They're not going to just be sitting around waiting for Saudi initiatives. And if this gets bloodier, then obviously their position will probably harden.
It's mission creep, spinning out of control. Mohamed Elalfy, you agree?
Now we have to explain another point. Now, this airstrikes not against Houthis only, but against Ali Saleh forces too, cooperating with Houthis.
The forces of the former President Saleh.
And also that is the first scene. The second scene, there is a chaos in this country several years ago, even during Saleh and Al-Qaeda on the ground in Yemen, and there is operations for Al-Qaeda during Saleh days. Also, now the Iranians become in the Yemen scene, in the political scene in Yemen, and is not they didn't stop by just giving speeches. No, they send the military equipment and trainers to Houthis forces last week. So now this fight against the Iranian intervention is number one. Number two is to cut the Iranian hands in this area. Number three is to prove that we need to achieve a peace for the Yemeni people. Number four is that this extreme groups in Yemen treating the Saudi borders and GCC countries and treating also Bab al-Mandab Gate in the Red Sea for Egypt. And this will this chaos and a huge number of extremists in Yemen will save environment for the international terrorism. For this reason, the international community support this operation. Now, of course, the first announced was by Saudi ambassador in the American soil, as I said, but not to put America under pressure, but to prove that the weakness for the Arab countries in this area to say no more weakness, there is no cooperation, we are apart from this area, we have the ability and the capability to achieve peace in this area, and you have the power to do it. United States don't have another choice only to approve, and also because United States go to a wrong way to play the nuclear file with Iran against Arab countries, because United States it was going to approve, if there is no fast action from this coalition or Arab countries, is to put the Iranian forces as a leader for this area. So now the American, last point is the American project to stop in Egypt, June 36, 2013, and the second project to use Iranians against Arab countries stopped last night.
All right, we saw that there's been the irony of it all. I'll put it to you first, Rouzbeh Parsi, is that yesterday we got the news that the United States had launched airstrikes against Tikrit, and this while Iranian-backed Shia forces were on the ground fighting against the jihadists. Now, this Thursday, we're getting reports that those militias have pulled back. Is that a further sign that this is crystallizing over what's happened in Yemen into a broader Shia versus Sunnis fight?
There's absolutely people who would like to see it like in those terms and who would like to see that become reality. But I think it's much more nuanced and much more complicated. The United States and Iran do not see eye to eye on a number of issues, and that is not going to change just because one manages to basically close down the nuclear file once and for all. So this is just another example of the fact that in the region they are not necessarily aligned, and there will be differences between them for many years to come. So I think in that sense, there is almost a hysterical way within the Arab world to look at the nuclear negotiations.
So what you're saying, Rouzbeh, is that despite all that's going on, we could see by next Tuesday that major breakthrough we're waiting for at those Iranian nuclear talks in Switzerland?
Absolutely. Because the whole success of the nuclear negotiations has been that it has been compartmentalized and hermetically sealed from everything else that's been going on. If it hadn't, the Ukraine crisis would probably have brought Russia and the United States against each other in those negotiations, and it did not, because the topic was not broached. Everything else happening in the world, all other headaches, are left at the door so that they can concentrate on the nuclear issue. They might discuss the other things, but they have so far managed quite successfully to not let anything else disturb the modalities of the talks itself.
All right, that's a point I'll put to the rest of the panel. When we come back, you're watching the France 24 debate.